So the president gets to declare his top priorities. And for the longest time, immigration and border enforcement was, it wasn't even on the radar screen. With President Trump, it was in the top 5. I think it was number 3. And as a result of that, we got access to a bunch of agencies that have techniques, skills, tools, technology that goes well beyond what we've ever experienced. And that really enabled us to start painting a better picture along the border. One of the things that's happening right now is that up until about 2010, 2014, I think is more realistic, most people coming across were single adults.
Right.
Yeah, so they were arrested. Some were prosecuted. Some were just simply returned back into Mexico. In 2014, people began to realize that they could exploit the asylum loophole. In other words, I come here and I say, Theo, I want asylum.
Right.
And because of that, I've got to process you and then I've got to release you. And when I release you, now you have access to state aid. You get a work authorization, and you may not have a hearing for 5 years. And that's if you elect to show up. And a lot of people don't show up for their hearings. So they don't necessarily qualify for asylum. And I think it's one of the shortfalls of this, because you've really, you've bastardized the definition of asylum. And for those that truly need asylum, now they've become one of a million people asking for it, and you've taken that away from them.
Right.
And at the same time, now these folks are using the system against the system in order to benefit from it. Excuse me. And so the family units, they come in, they ask for asylum, they get into the U.S. and they disappear. Like looking at today, right now, with the situation at the border, it's a crisis.
Is it a crisis?
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you why it's a crisis. There's a focus on kids. There's a focus on family units. So in 2019, we had a border crisis then. And what made it a crisis was these two populations, families and kids, what they do is they cause the system to come to a complete grinding halt.
Right.
Because there is no law enforcement entity in the world that's designed to house or care or feed children and families.
Right.
So we often heard, negative backlash about, it's inhumane treatment and X, Y, and Z, but nobody's situated for that. But when you get, I think it was almost 200,000 family units and something like 80,000 unaccompanied children, when you put that into the system that's not designed for it, it stops, it's gridlocked, and then everything else falls apart behind it. You can't prosecute, you can't house criminal aliens. So the system will collapse. It's a crisis on multiple fronts. First and foremost, because it's not being addressed, the flow is going to continue.
Right.
The unfortunate part, and for the Border Patrol, we're apolitical. We're worked for 32 years under different administrations. Every administration, you give them the facts, you tell them what you think is going to work, what's going to benefit, and then you step back and then you fall in the line. Mm-hmm. This administration was briefed on, if you reverse these programs, if you take these steps, this is what's going to happen. And unfortunately, sure as shit, that's what happened. We also have to recognize that COVID has impacted these countries probably much more severely than it has the U.S. The medical capabilities aren't the same as they are here in the U.S.
Right.
So you're getting a population of people that are coming into the U.S. We're not doing COVID testing on them. So you have the potential of another resurgence of COVID in the U.S. Part of what happened when COVID started back, last year, is we implemented what's known as Title 42, which is the ability to, when you come across, I make the arrest and I expel you immediately. I don't bring you into a station. My goal is to get you back across the border and out of the U.S. as quickly as possible to minimize that exposure.
And that was started during COVID?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So prior to that, it was you're arrested, driven to a station, processed, and with COVID, it was you don't even come into the station, and we get you out of there as quickly.
Was that kind of nice?
That's great, but the only problem with it is that so when I came to the Border Patrol in '88, we were just arresting people. You'd process them, and you'd return them right back to Mexico, and then you'd see them again in the same shift or the next day. And so it was this constant revolving door. With Title 42, we're kind of there again because all the courts are shut down, so there's no prosecution, there's no deterrent. You can't house them. So you put them back on the border, and the smuggler says, "Hey, I'm taking you back across. You paid me. I'm going to get you back across." And they just keep on doing this until the Biden administration recognizes that their actions and their words are having an impact. They're driving illegal migration. Until that changes, this is going to continue. So when we talk about crisis, I mentioned the system coming to a grinding halt, but the bigger issue is that there isn't enough from this administration saying, you can't come here.
Right.
You're going to be prosecuted. The reality behind this whole thing is, and people may find this quizzical, thinking, here's an enforcement officer, but our immigration system has to be revamped. And you have to think about this as it's a whole system, the enforcement part and the legal part. If you fix the legal part, then that enables the enforcement part to focus on the true criminals, the really bad elements. When you have a legal system that's messed up and is not working well, that's when you get all these people that take the illegal route, and then it just burdens border security. So, I'm a strong advocate of, whether it's this administration or the next one, somebody has to come in and fix our immigration system as a whole.
Really?
But they can't do it half-assed. You can't focus on the legal part and not the enforcement part, or you can't take apart the enforcement part and then bolster the legal part. You need to do it simultaneously so that you've got this immigration system, this umbrella that works well. The Title 42 thing, it was also about preserving our medical system in the U.S., because we wanted to make sure that we had ample medical care for U.S. residents.
Right.
If you allow this population to come in, it can overwhelm the medical system. But when we have people being released at the border, so now you have to house, feed, care for, you have to provide medical care for them. So some of these border communities, they're not equipped for that. They're not equipped for a surge of 1,000 or 20,000 people coming in on a daily basis. And so it overwhelms them. They don't have the deep pockets to pay for this stuff. And right now the government's not doing anything to help them out.
Is it hard for Border Patrol agents, like some of them, whether they're to set aside any political beliefs they may have and just do their job? Do you see any of that? Or most of the guys, like you said, administration just changes over time, and you guys just kind of stay on the task at hand?
It does bother you personally. Of course, you want somebody that's supporting your endeavors, but you don't take it to work. Again, because every 4 years you have the potential for working for a new boss.
Right.
And the rules can change every 4 years. I think what's fortunate for the agent in the field is that you're tasked with enforcing the laws that have been legislated by Congress.
Right.
And so even though the president may not like those laws, it's the law, and it's hard for him to change it, or her to change it maybe someday. So you try to stay apolitical, but it certainly bothers you when you're not getting support. We need Congress, and we need the White House, but I think Congress more than anything, kind of to get in the game.
Right.
If I can be blunt, Congress needs to get its head out of its ass and start doing something.
Right.
They have the power of the purse and the power to legislate.
Right.
They need to apply the purse towards addressing this, helping with the kids and the family units. They need to legislate. They need to revamp the entire immigration system. And, I applaud the Biden administration for looking at, what do we do to invest in the source? Where are these people coming from?
Right.
That's great, and we've always tried to do economic redevelopment in these countries. But they have to recognize that you can't put $1 billion in El Salvador today and expect it to stop this flow.
Right.
You have to recognize that it's going to take 10 or 20 years before that plan comes to fruition. So in order to make things better, it's revamping the immigration system, it's helping some of these sending countries, but it's also having a very strong, effective immigration system that includes the border enforcement.
Right.
You can't undermine it. And whether it's technology, more agents, more infrastructure, whatever it may be, you need to secure that border. Congress has to do its job.
Right.
It really hasn't done anything towards addressing the problem. And a lot of what's going on right now is Congress's fault from the last 2 or 3 years, because a lot of the funding that was earmarked for detention, for remodeling detention facilities, was removed from the budget, because part of the intent was to ensure that people were being released.
Okay.
So now you fast forward 2 years, and what's happening? We can't hold these people, so we have to release them. So it's a vicious cyclical game, and I would just hope that our elected officials just focus on the problem. Not only for the humanity of these kids and these families, but also for the bigger aspect of the border security. One thing we didn't touch was terrorism.
Yeah.
I assure you, and I can't speak to specifics because there's classifications behind it, but there are folks that have terrorist ties, terrorist training, that are intent on hurting us, that have come across our southern border.
What do you feel like is some type of a solution or something moving forward?
It's the legal aspect. It really is. It needs to be revamped. What you described about programs, refugee programs are well established. So where you're sponsoring refugees as they come in different category from an asylum seeker.
Right.
But there are programs for that whether it's a church group or a particular individual that supports that refugee and then helps them assimilate and become part of America. Really, the key is legal migration, but it's got to be a system that's just much more effective and efficient. The reason people start coming across illegally is you may apply legally, but it's going to take you 3 to 5 years.
Right.
And then the categories, again, a lot of what we have are unskilled labor.
Right.
I agree with one thing that President Trump did talk about was, if we're going to bring people in, why aren't we bringing in more skilled labor? We're not the country that we used to be 40, 50 years ago, where we had a great demand for unskilled labor.
Right.
We have a greater demand for skilled labor, your technology folks, stuff like that. So if we're going to do this, it has to be revamped so that it's addressing the particular types of skills that we need, but it's also done in such a manner that it's effective. We live in a world where we want things now.
Right.
Nobody wants to wait 2 or 3 years, and that's part of what's driving this illegal migration. Is if I apply legally, A, I may not qualify. B, it's going to take me forever.
Dang.
And then C, right now, if I come across illegally, I'm going to get released. At least that's the mindset. That's
Right.
what we're seeing on social media and chatter and debriefs that we do with the folks we encounter.
And that's some of the stuff that's really the worst, because that's how people are learning about it and getting inspired, really. Like, now's the time,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's out there.
Hope you enjoyed that video, and you can watch another. And you can watch this one, you can watch this one. Different options, different choices. Some guy just brings you one option, not this guy. 2 options. Watch one, this one or this one.